To do theater or not to do theater? That is the question. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of doing theater if you are an actor who is primarily concerned with the TV and film industry. Hey everyone, I'm Matthew Cornwell with Get Taped here in Atlanta, Georgia, one of Atlanta's original audition taping services, which I co-own with my amazingly talented, beautiful wife and best friend, Brooke. Oh, new headshot. Just a reminder once again that if you don't subscribe to our Monday newsletter, the Scuttlebutt, well, why? Okay, so personally, it had been over 10 years since I had done a stage play until last week. Now, in the last 10 or so years, I've done a ton of improv shows that are live on stage. I even had a graduation stand-up show somewhere in there. But in terms of doing an actual play, we have to go all the way back to, I think, 2013. So gracing the stage once again last week brought this topic to the front of my mind. And I started to realize that there are a lot of actors that are pursuing television and film and commercials that have never done live theater. Some have maybe done open mic nights for stand-up or the aforementioned improv show, but not an actual stage play. And yet, if you pay attention to enough Q&As with casting directors, they seem to really like theater on the resume, which unfortunately has led many actors to lie about theater experience on their resume and just don't. You should just assume you're going to get caught in that lie. So just don't. It makes you look desperate and needy, and it's just icky. Why? Why bother? But let's dig deeper. What are the actual pros and cons of pursuing theater if you are primarily concerned and focused on television and film as an actor? Okay, starting with the pros, one of the first ones is you get to rehearse. I mean, wouldn't it be nice to not have to be off book within 24 hours for your audition deadline? And then if you get to set and they've changed the script, well, now you have minutes to learn the new lines. In theater, you have weeks, generally speaking, to learn your lines, to get off book. Additionally, this means you get to slowly build that character in theater. You get to sit with those lines, sit with that character, dream about that character. And you get to explore that character in rehearsal over and over and over again. Their motivations, the backstory, the emotional content, the physicality. If there is a voice to your character, you get to slowly build that over time. Another pro is that you get to build connections with the cast and the crew. I never got to do summer camp growing up, and I feel like theater is the next best thing. Even if you're an introvert like me, you find yourself building new friendships and new connections over this protracted period of time, the rehearsals and the performances. Now, here's another big pro, the thrill of the live audience. Whew. There is nothing like it. It is a drug. And while I have been getting my hits from those live improv shows that I mentioned over the last decade or so, there's something different about live theater. Yes, it can be nerve-wracking the first time or the second time or maybe even the 1,000th time on stage, but it is so worth it once you hit that spotlight on the stage and you get transported into the world of the play. There's just nothing like it. And TV and film, when that director yells action, it's not the same thing. Speaking of that comparison between stage and film, on film, you're only in character for seconds or maybe minutes at a time if that director likes to do long takes. In theater, you get to stay in character for the entire show, night after night. I once did the musical Forever Plaid, and those 4 characters never leave the stage other than once, if I recall, to grab props backstage. But it is a continuous one-act play where we never left the stage. Therefore, I was in character for the entire show, and it was so much fun. Whereas in film, I think the longest take I've ever done was probably in The Menu, where the director, Mark Mylod, liked to shoot in long, continuous takes with sometimes multiple camera angles. So we were doing 5, 6, 7-minute takes. But that's a rarity in the film and TV world. Now, another pro, depending on your personality type, is not having to watch yourself back in theater. You're not recording the rehearsals. You're not recording, generally speaking, the performances. So there's none of that weird ego that comes into the mix when we have to watch ourselves back in the TV and film world in the audition phase or seeing the finished product. Also with theater, you get immediate feedback after that live show. You not only have feedback during the show in the form of applause or laughter or gasps, but after the show, if you stick around to talk to that audience, you get that immediate feedback from fellow castmates, maybe the director, if they're still sitting watching performances in the audience. Sometimes they don't once the show opens, but you also hear from the fans, and that feedback is precious. It's so different than that on-set experience where you have a crew that has to stay quiet the whole time, and then you're getting weird feedback from the director, and since you're not getting to watch playback, there's just not a good feedback loop on the TV or the film set compared to having that feedback in the on-stage experience. Stepping back to the audition phase, in theater, generally speaking, you have a lot less competition. I mean, it's common here in the Southeast United States that if you're auditioning for a big TV series or a very known property like a Marvel film, there's going to be thousands of other actors that are being submitted for the same role that you're being submitted for. If you get the audition, you're still going to be up against dozens upon dozens of other actors for that role. That might only be one line. In theater, on the other hand, especially if you're doing more local theater, regional theater, maybe even some non-equity community theater, you might only have a dozen or 24 actors that are coming in for that role. And comparatively speaking, it's just a lot better odds in the theater world to audition for a role and have a chance of booking it. Closely related, in TV and film, the role might just go to the person who looks the part. Whereas in theater, we're not as concerned about whether or not you look perfect for the part. It is more about the acting. So it feels more like a merit-based system when it comes to auditioning for theater. And that's good news, because it means that I can work on my craft and I will see the dividends of that work that I put into my craft in the form of offers for theater. Additionally, in theater, I don't have to always play just my age range. In Forever Plaid, I was in my late 20s playing characters that were supposed to be closer to their teens. And quite honestly, I could do that role again. I also played Charlie Brown when I was in my mid-20s. So there's a lot more flexibility in theater as to the types of characters you can play. Speaking of Charlie Brown, you can also audition for animals like Snoopy. And that sense of freedom or openness when it comes to casting can be really comforting to an actor, to know that you're not just limited to the specific look that you walk into a room with, that the director of that play or the artistic director of that theater might have more creativity or imagination as to the types of characters you might be right for that aren't necessarily limited to your look. Oh, and here's another pro. It's a great antidote to the strikes of 2023 or this weird slope period in 2024. If your audition numbers are down, way down for TV and film and commercials, then it can be a perfect time, a perfect season in your life to audition for theater and to fulfill that need to express yourself. And the last thing I'll say is sometimes you get paid. That's great. Okay, great, Matt, but it can't all be pros. There have to be some cons to doing theater, right? Right? Okay, yeah. For the television and film actor who is considering filling up their schedule with rehearsals and performances, yes, there can be cons to pursuing theater, namely filling up your schedule with lots of rehearsals and performances, and you might be then taken out of the running for a potential TV and film booking if there's a conflict in dates, and especially if they did not offer you an understudy for the play. Also, another con, I guess, is that if you mess up on stage, there is no back to one. There is no second take. But that's not really a con. That's just on you. You need a better foundation of craft if that is one of the things you're worried about, or if you think that is the downside of theater. This is also another reason why improv should be a mandatory part of your training. So I redact that as a con. That should not be in the video. Can we just edit that out? Oh, we're live? Oh. As I continue to dig for potential cons, I guess if you get cast in a play and into rehearsals, you start to realize that the play's not coming together, or the cast isn't gelling, or the director is just not stellar, that could make the experience feel like the whole thing is one big regret. But that's going to be a rarity. That should be the exception to the rule. And again, probably doesn't belong on a list of cons. And the last con that I'll list is that a lot of non-equity theater, especially community theater, isn't going to pay. And if it ends up conflicting with potential paid work in the television, film, and commercial space, then that can be a real downer. But again, if you plan ahead and don't live in fear over what if, then it's really not that big of a deal if you're willing to donate your time to this community theater, to this lower tier, lower budget production. The performance, the thrill, the rush, that drug that I mentioned of being on stage will definitely outweigh the con of not getting paid. Case in point, the theater production I did last week, I did for free. All the rehearsal time and then the performance itself. Unfortunately, it was a one-night only performance, but I did all that as a sort of donation because it was for a good cause. It was something I believed in. And any other cons that I could come up with, or even that you might be able to come up with, I feel like would just be sort of grasping at straws. Because here's the bottom line. Do theater. Do it. It makes you a much better actor. It's fulfilling. It looks great on a resume. You might even get some decision makers to come to one of your performances. And of course, if you're the one inviting them, always offer comp tickets to any industry peeps. And so, like anything in life, you can find things to complain about when it comes to theater. But in my humble opinion, the pros vastly outweigh the cons when it comes to doing live theater. Do theater. Just do it. All right, if you have any comments on this topic, please drop them below. That's it for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on set or on stage.